Hey folks, welcome back. Here we're at part 2 of my extremely long preview and first impressions of the John Carter of Mars 2D20 based role-playing system from Modiphius Entertainment. We looked at the slipcase set last time, and I was so enraptured by it that I basically went through page by page, which was not my intention initially, but I hope you enjoyed that. Now we're going to take a look at the supplemental rulebooks, and what I probably will do is keep this rather short and then do a quick part 3 on the accessories as well, so the dice, maps, and GM's kit. So without further ado, let's get started. We'll start with the Dotar Sojat era supplemental rulebook. I believe this is the first one in terms of the John Carter of Mars novel timeline, but we'll soon see if I'm wrong about that. There we go. Once again, as you can see, these are all still sealed. So this is my first time looking at them. We've got nice action-packed cover art. We've got some green Martians leaping over a balcony. John Carter diving into battle here against some hideous grotesquerie down there. That was definitely one of the beasts in the core rulebook, but I've already forgotten the name. I went through them rather quickly, all things considered. So each of these books, I believe, is about 128 pages. Yeah, thereabouts. And these are designed to flesh out the different eras of the novel series, advancing the kind of timeline of what's happening on Barsoom, and allowing the GM the information you need to update your game to those eras. So you can see, for example, there's important tales of the era, champions of the era, so that presumably is some stat lines for useful NPCs, updates to existing characters, then updates to the mysteries of Barsoom. So, during that time, some more knowledge of Barsoom will have been revealed and updated in the book series. Then some tips for the narrator and rules for airships, which is really cool. So you've got airships as core equipment, and you also have rules for creation and design. So we'll flip through relatively quickly this time, I promise. I think the main draw for people who are kind of rules-oriented here will definitely be the airship stuff. Having airships available to design or to buy will really open up the world of Barsoom for exploration, so that definitely is attractive to me. Then there's some... what's all this? Okay. This seems to be an introduction to the character of the era. Then we get into the peoples of the Dotar Sojat era, the specific challenges of this period, your character's place in the world, which is outlined here, some new Earthborn arrivals that are of special note. Then there's some new talents available for Red Martians, new accolades and titles they can gain, as well as flaws. And the same again for the Green Martians, and for the Earthborn as well. And then other talents. So these, I guess, we've got some higher grade talents here for the central themes of the era, which it says are exploration, discovery, and the forging of new alliances. Some also reference airship combat and flying, as those rules are featured later in the book. And these can be used by any character. So just as an example, we have Airship Marine, a grade 2 talent. So when fighting on board an airship, you gain a bonus d20 to attack and defend while fighting. So very useful stuff. You can also get things like Expert Bombardier when you're using bombs and artilleries, which presumably is useful to have on an airship. You can also have some new flaws as well, and there's some advice about altering your existing talents to reflect the era. Then for Champions of the Era, so we have some new narrator characters here. We've got the ruthless Thark Jadak Tal Hajus. Loads of background info on him. We've got Sab Than, the young prince of Zodanga. We have Than Kosis, the charismatic Jadak of Zodanga, who is a keen strategist, apparently. We have Bar Komas, the bloody-handed Jadak of Warhoon. Dakova, the savage Warhoon chief. Zad, the brave Thark warrior. Wish there were some more illustrations here, I have to say, but at least there's a lot of characters here to work with, and a great deal of description of their background, so plenty for the GM to use narratively, but it can be helpful to have a picture to work with, rather than just, oh, they look like a general green Martian type. Then there's some updates for existing characters here. So it seems like there's not too much changed in this era relative to what's in the core book, because this is kind of an earlier era. Then we have some updates to the Mysteries of Barsoom. So some more talents and powers and places have been discovered. There's some new equipment available. Face crystals. We have stun rays. We have heart burrowers. Wow. So they can be inserted into a wound, and they remove all injury immediately and 1 wound affliction per turn until they are all healed. The process is painful and can be traumatic and disorienting, dealing 1 die of damage with the psychic quality to the patient's confusion stress track. Okay. You're exchanging confusion for physical wounds, which is probably a good trade when you're on the brink of death. Then you have smokers. What is that? Okay. So they are... Oh, they're used for coordinating strikes. Okay. Then you have submersible snorkels, warriors' robes, all kinds of interesting stuff here. Then some background on technology's purpose, why it exists, who should possess it, rationality and invention in the setting. Then we have some warnings here about the Barsoomian tales are largely rationalist. Things have a reason for why they exist and an explanation for how they operated it. So you don't really have wizards and magic and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of telling you to keep things relatively grounded. Then we have some new powers here. Adrenaline surge, beast form. So you have psychic manipulation of the physical form taken to superhuman extremes. You can use advanced psychic techniques to make someone appear to disappear from sight. You have some esoteric martial arts, which give you things like disarming blocks, throws. You can deflect projectiles, which is very cool. Hyper meditation. Sounds useful. You can mold your appearance. Necropathy. The ability to read and communicate with another mind normally ends with death. However, a powerful telepath can communicate with the minds of the recently deceased by picking up on residual psychic energies left in the brain. Wow, very cool. We get telekinesis as well. We have undying. Characters with this power tend to take a long time to realize it. After a certain point, they notice they're almost never sick, always recover when they are, and seem to have stopped aging at some point. Wow, so you get some sense of immortality. Then you can get a 7th sense, which gives you flashes of near-future calamities. There's some new mysterious places in the world that are revealed. Ocean basins, orchards and farmlands, unknown vistas, Martian gardens, seasides, green Martian incubators. Okay. So here we have locations from the book Princess of Mars. Some sub-areas of the city of Korad, it seems like. The arena, Red Martian Farms. There's some dungeons to deal with. Then we have some inspired locations. So, a sea of ruined ships. We've got the Isle of Lessa. Nice bit of artwork there with some green Martians attacking. Then we have tips for narrators in the era. So there should be a sense of constant conflict, a sense of longing, the conflict of tradition versus innovation. So quite some interesting narrative hooks there for the GM to work with. And some prehistory to the era. The adventures in Totar Sojat era. And a generic kind of idea of a Princess of Mars campaign structure that you could use as a GM. Various plot seeds and ideas here. So again, lots of great GM guidance. I really think the game is well designed for relative beginners to role-playing. They really give you a lot of material to work with. You're not kind of just given a load of setting material and mechanics and told to go with it. And now we get to the rules meatiness of the book, which is the airships. So there's information about airship armaments, their controls, their armor, how they engage, the kind of tests you do when controlling your ship, like for command, gunnery, navigation, piloting, repair, stability, and other things. The methods of ship movement and dealing with range, the different positions on the ship and what they're responsible for, and then a nice diagram here of ship ranges. So when you're dealing with engagements or chasing or pursuing another ship, then you use these range bands instead of specific numerical ranges of X number of squares like in D&D. Then there's details on ship actions during combat, dealing with boarding actions. Yeah, this is a great add-on to the game. Definitely would be a lot of fun and add to that Swords and Planets atmosphere. You could also ram opposing ships, which seems amazingly dangerous. Then you have the use of ship weapons, dropping bombs, some sidebars about the guns available on Barsoom. If you want to shoot at the crew rather than the ship itself, how ships suffer damage, ship damage recovery, the impact of ship size, different hazards that can face the ship, like malfunctions, and then we have some tables for airship creation and design, including some notes on balance, and there's different kinds of frames. So a personal scale ship for 1 or 2 people, a sport flyer for between 1 and 3 members plus a few passengers, light transports, light warships. They lack the range of scouts and other vessels, but are the first of the true fighting ships. Heavy warships, heavy transports, and battle wagons. They are deadly cruisers, utterly terrifying battleships that can level cities with bombs and sustain fire. Wow, cool. And then you can design variants, you can add attributes and flaws to your ship, and presumably there will be some sample ships here. So here's a capable military light transport. So it has stats for crew, engines, controls, systems, hull, and armor. Details about the weapons, and has the talent of modified engine. And then there are different design variants depending on the kingdom and culture. And yeah, airships as core equipment. So here we have some basic write-ups for battleships, civilian flyers, cruisers, destroyers, and fighters. Interesting. So these, I guess, would be small-scale airships designed to swarm over larger targets. Then we have dreadnoughts, the largest of warships, and flying fortresses, gigantic technological terrors. So these are unique super weapons. They're so large and dangerous they have their own size, gigantic. Gigantic size exists above lumbering size. Ships conflicts against this size of ship are long drawn-out affairs where opponents have little chance of victory. Okay, so you want to be careful using those in a campaign. Then we have more write-ups for frigates, personal scale flyers, pirate raiders, scout flyers, Thark airships, transports. And then we have some rules for airborne creatures. And then spaceships. Wow. Spaceships and space combat. Cool. So space is the 3 main principles. Space is vast, space is deadly, and space is alien. Makes sense. And then we have a beautiful character sheet here for a ship designed for JCOM. Very nice to write things up in this way. You've got your stress tracks, system breaches, your 6 main attributes. You can give it a name, size, and its purpose. Your ship talents, details of all the weapons and flaws. Very cool. I'm really happy with those airship rules. Just like in the main book, they give you a ton of examples to work with, plus rules for creating your own variants and stuff. So, you can jump right in with the prefab stuff, or you can get into designing your own ships. They really open it all up to you. And the mechanics, again, are pretty elegant. So there's plenty of room to work with what they've given you, or to kind of build on that to form something more crunchy if you would like. Next, we move up to the Prince of Helium era. So we'll see what goes on here. I assume that as we go through, the sections on updating different NPCs and so forth will get more extensive, because the first book is covering basically right from the second half of the first book, as far as I understand, from the core rule book. So there's not that many changes to key characters, but as we carry on, the main characters in the narrative, like John Carter himself, will get more and more powerful. So Yeah, let's just dive right in. We've got our This is Sparta moment here on the end papers. Then we have our credits. So what awaits us? We have a description of the era, an era of change, key tales of the stories of the era, the peoples of the era, again, champions of the era, so some new characters, and updates to existing characters. So very much organized almost identically in terms of structure to the previous book. Then we got some new mysteries of Barsoom, tips for the narrator, and then we've got the new rules sections on supporting characters and dueling, which is very cool. I'm actually very curious about the dueling rules because that's a big part of Dune in the 2D20 system, and I'm wondering if there's any similarities here. I imagine that the dueling rules in JCOM will be simpler. In Dune, there's quite a lot of intricate stuff that you can do in a one-on-one duel that reflects the kind of trickery and complexity of fighting with knives and shields as reflected in the Dune novels. So yeah, here we have details on the updates happening to the Martian storyline during this era, key stories you can use for plot seeds and background. Then we have some more information. It looks like so you get some examples of how you could use elements of the novels in your own campaigns. Then we have updates on the statuses of the peoples of the era. So what's going on with the Green Hordes, the Red Nations, the Firstborn, and the Therns and White Martians, and the Okar as well. Then we got some new talents for the Okar, so they must have been featuring much more during this era of the novels, I suppose. I don't think they had any new talents in the Dotar Sojat era book, the previous book. They also gained some new accolades and flaws as well. And we have some new features for the Firstborn. They can gain a grade 4 talent of Perfect Health, Ruthless Efficiency. Very cool. Then we have the White Martians. So note that White Martian characters are not a default option, but are an option detailed in Chapter 14, Secrets of Barsoom, in the core rulebook. So White Martians are kind of an optional player character race. But if you do use them, then as outlined in the core rulebook, then you have some additional options here for talents that they can use, including layers of deception and telepathic force. That sounds cool. And we have some flaws and accolades for them as well. And then we once again have a list of general talents that can be used by anybody of different grades. So again, lots of character options if you're going to play in this era. Then we have our champions of the era. This, by the way, is the Silk bookmark, which all the books have, which is always seems to be a trend nowadays that hardcover RPG books have those, which I'm a big fan of. Now we've got some new characters. Zat Aras, the Jed of Zodanga. Looks like a fairly beefy red Martian over there. We've got Horvastus, trusted naval officer of Helium. Yersted, Dator of the Firstborn, commander of the submarine of Issus. Oh, submarine, that's cool. Tokar Bar, Dwar of the Kaolian Road. Parthak, a loyal soldier of Zodanga. Fedor, daughter of Matai Shang. Kulan Tith, the Jadak of Kaol. So these seem to be all Red Nations people. Lakor of the Therns, so I think that's an aspect of the White Martian backgrounds. Talu, the Prince of Marantina. Solon, the Switchmaster of Kadabra, so he's a yellow Martian, according to the image here, an Okar. Thurid, Datar of the Firstborn. And then we have updates to previous characters. So it says, for example, John Carter is generally unchanged, though he's evolved his legendary hero talent to grade 7, and he may now fill his momentum pool to its limit with a conflict action once per scene. Very cool. So, once again, giving you an idea of how the story has progressed between the books for the main characters. Then we have some new technologies and new powers to reflect the era. We have submarines, which is very cool, and a great picture here of a submarine about to run into some kind of horrific, gigantic monstrosity there. You can have ship-to-ship harpoon combat as well, and grappling hooks, and they can use radio comms. That's very useful. Then some other tech, including spycraft, resonating rings. You have, other technology, Navy of the Firstborn, whose battleships are equipped for both air and water propulsion. That's cool. Then there's a Doomsday device. Wow, what's that? Okay. A secondary function of the control panel of the Guardian of the North is activation of the Doomsday device. Stored in tanks beneath the city are rays of the sun that are released in a controlled manner, allowing the capital to have summer-like conditions all year round. With the simple pull of a lever, the life-giving rays can be released all at once to completely destroy Kadabra. Oh my god. Okay, so look out for that if you're in Kadabra, I suppose. We have some new mysterious places with plot seeds to accompany them. Locations from the Gods of Mars book, including the Mountains of Ots, the Land of Lost Souls, the South Pole. We've got the Sea of Omean, the Firstborn Citadel. Lots of interesting places with pretty evocative names. The Carrion Caves, that's a good one. Loads of places to explore. Then we've got some new powers. Once again, a brief warning to keep things fairly grounded. It's not a magical setting as such, although psionic powers do exist. And then we've got some new powers. Battle Sense, Dream Travel. That's interesting. When you use this ability, target a sleeping person and make an Empathy plus Cunning test. The base difficulty is challenging, difficulty 2 for a sleeping character within sight. Let's see, so once inside a dream, you may attempt to attack the dreamer. Any weapons used gain the psychic quality, replacing any other qualities it possesses. Wow, that's pretty amazing. You can also have the power of flight with natural wings or implants or telekinetic power. You can have hyper attraction, which is special pheromones that attract others, even beyond normal attractiveness. Hyper contortion, ability to twist and bend your body in unlikely or seemingly impossible ways. Hyperactive senses. You can use hypnosis. You can have an iron body. You can project pain through psychic power. Sounds unpleasant. Pyrokinesis, so you can cause explosive and fiery effects with your mind. You can use a robotic body. Loads of great stuff in terms of new powers. Then we've got narrator tips for the era, which won't mean much to me, as I don't know anything about the background just yet. How to adventure during the Prince of Helium era. Designing a reasonable campaign in the era. Then we've got lists of adventure seeds. Again, loads and loads of useful stuff for GMs who just want to dive in. Because the system is pretty light in terms of the amount of numbers you need to generate for NPCs and so forth, you can get a lot out of just a few adventure seeds and build them into a pretty exciting narrative as players contribute as well by spending momentum and doing their crazy pulp actions to try and overcome the obstacles you throw in front of them. Now we have the rules for supporting characters. These are used extensively in Star Trek as well. So these are really useful and important rules. Basically, they are characters with a basic template and some simple modifiers. And so they're kind of recurring characters that join your player character crew, or they can be recurring elements of a storyline, and eventually they could even advance to become a full-on player character if they replace a hero who's departed either through death or moving on to bigger and better things. So it outlines here how to create a basic template for a supporting character, and what happens if you want to use them as recurring characters, and how they can gain renown or talents or whatever as they grow over time. And then there are tables for generating supporting characters randomly, including their hooks and motivations. And then we have a whole bunch of supporting character examples. You can see their write-ups are much shorter than the full-on character builds. They still have the core stats and talents and accolades and stuff. But yeah, these are just supporting characters that can jump into the narrative, and they can help distinguish your game, give your players characters that don't take focus away from them as such, but they help out. They can be useful during tricky situations. They can help them build alliances, and eventually they can become an important part of your collective story that you're creating at the table. So it's a really useful mechanic, and again, highly recommended because it does work extremely well in the context of Star Trek, and I think it would work really well in this campaign world as well, given the focus on kind of the evolving conflict between these different Barsoomian nations and everything else like that. So having a few supporting characters that sort of keep characters apprised of what's happening in the wider world, I think would be really useful, both for the players and for the GM. Then we got some rules on developing longer-term projects. Then we have duels. Okay, so we can have gladiatorial duels. We can have challenges to leadership. There are different types of weapons you can choose for your duels. Atypical duels. So that could be a game of Jatan, Martian chess, where the loser agrees to drink a fatal poison, where the board itself is rigged to deliver a fatal shock. Yeah, that's a pretty atypical duel. A duel on a narrow platform or wire with the goal of knocking your opponent off. A battle of wits using an explosive, poison, or deadly beast. Wow, so lots of different options. Then there are the rules for declaring a duel. What happens if you refuse? The terms of the duel and the ways of ending the duel. You can also duel against beasts. And then things that can happen when you win. What happens if you try to cheat? So yeah, in general, it seems like there's a lot of detail around the characteristics of the duel and its impact on your kind of renown and honor and so forth. And there's specific dueling talents as well. But it doesn't have the kind of, there's a dueling battle map that you use in Dune, which when I cover that game, you will see, where you kind of move your weapons around this map according to your actions and talents and try to evade your opponent's guard and so forth. But here, the detail comes from, the talents that you decide to specialize in if you're going to be a duelist, and the circumstances of the duel itself, both in terms of the narrative and, how the duel will be reflected depending on the outcome in the storyline. Then we have narrator secrets for Helium. There's a nice location map here. So this seems to be a city map of Helium with some key locations: the Scarlet Tower, the Gate of Jadox, the Avenue of the Ancestors, Temple of Reward, and the Jadox Palace. Very useful. And we're almost at the end here. Then we have Zodanga, another key location, with a number of marked out spots here. I do like the style of cartography in this game, I have to say. The visual impression of the game is solid, I think. The narrator secrets of the palace. And another map here of lower floors. And there we go. So once again, some very useful rules in there, particularly the supporting characters, I think are a great addition. And one of the strengths of the games in the D20 system that I have so far, two D20, I should say. D20 being Wizards of the Coast's D&D 3.5 era. And finally, we have the Jadox of Jadox era. So I believe this is the time period of the last novels in the John Carter series. So it should, I imagine, have a very similar structure once again. So we talk about, this is the last era of the series of novels. Tales of the era, peoples of the era, including new talents and accolades, including for mixed heritage characters. Then we get, again, to champions of the era and updates to previous characters, new mysteries, new talents and powers, narrator tips, and some further adventures, and a random adventure generation system. Very cool. Then we got rules for mad science. So you can do limb and organ transplants, brain surgery, inventions. Wow, very cool. Okay, so let's dive in. Again, I won't go too much into the details of the era and the tales because it won't mean much if you're like me and don't know anything about the eras of the series because you haven't read it or seen the movie. I'm starting to get a sense for the general vibe, having learned about who the different nations are, looking through the core book and these books. But yeah, definitely a lot of background that is beyond me at this point. So before running it, I would be looking into these elements a lot more, of course. Then we have updates on the peoples of the era. So it's a time of relative peace and prosperity for Mars. John Carter is now warlord, and the alliances he forged have made the city of Helium one of the most powerful kingdoms on the planet. So, well done to John. I don't know what's going on here, but that's pretty gross. But there's some newly discovered races. We have the Chaldanes. So they have a body of a strong and perfectly proportioned red Martian, but a grotesque, overly large head that is bluish-gray with large lidless eyes, slit-like nostrils, and a round mouth ringed with teeth. Okay, so that's a Chaldane. That's fairly unsettling, I have to say. So they gain the talent of memories of the past. When you encounter something for the first time, if you can come up with a plausible way that an ancestor could have encountered this thing, you may ask the narrator one question. When acting on this information, you gain an additional D20 to tests. Very cool. So they know the basics of personal combat. You can command others, particularly those subordinate to you and, quote, dumb beasts. You can quickly learn new technologies and sciences. You can disturb, surprise, and confuse other races with your ability to separate from your Rykor. So I guess your head can detach. That's interesting. Wow, interesting. So you can also ignore the effects of poison gas or lack of oxygen, as you don't need to breathe. Very useful. Morgors, wow, it look like undead. The skeleton men of Jupiter are a strange and deadly race from beyond the atmosphere of Barsoom. They're exceptionally thin with almost no apparent fat or muscle. They have ivory white skin clinging to their sturdy skeletons, giving them the appearance of desiccated corpses. Okay. So they gain +2 to might or cunning, and they can add +1 to either daring or reason. They speak the language of Jupiter. They know how to fight with swords, pistols, explosives, and other Morgor weapons. They can operate as part of a military unit, and you can fly Morgor ships and operate the invisibility technology built into them. Wow, okay. Then we have the Saboteurs, a downtrodden people nearly all controlled by the Morgors, native to Jupiter, which they call Urubus. They've been vassal states of the Morgor Empire for generations. They get +2 to empathy or reason, and +1 each to any other 2 attributes. They know the basics of self-defense with swords and knives. They can fly airships, and they know how to appear docile and avoid notice by Morgor soldiers and slavers. And a cute little blue baby there. Then we have Messinas. I guess that's that guy. They are not a race of Barsoom, but come instead from Thuria, the closer moon of Mars. They utterly control the forests in which they live. To most races, they're extremely strange and ugly creatures. They have one eye in the center of their forehead with a cat-like pupil, a stiff mane of yellowish hair, and they have 2 mouths. All right. They have a racial talent of Mighty Predator, so when fighting unarmed, you may always use daring when making attack tests, and when unarmed, your attacks have the sharp quality, so they have sharp claws. They lose, however, -1 to reason, but they gain +2 to daring and +1 to might, and +1 to 2 of the following: cunning, empathy, or passion. What they can do includes climbing with great skill and speed, hunting and ambushing prey, and fighting armed only with your hands and strong teeth. Yeah, they are pretty hideous. But that's pretty cool. So there's a bunch of new races here. We've got kangaroo men as well. Look at that. Got kangaroo legs. They have a racial talent of natural jumper, which makes sense. You can reduce the difficulty of jumping over an obstacle by 1. When making a movement action during an action scene, reduce the momentum cost to move an additional range by 1. So they can jump far and they can jump efficiently. They get +2 to either daring, empathy, passion, or reason, and +1 to any 2 others. What they can do, they have the basics of self-defense with swords, knives, and spears. They can hunt and forage for themselves. They can cover the ground quickly with massive leaps, and they boast in grandiose fashion. Very nice. So that's pretty cool. Loads of new races in here. New player options are always good. There's some new talents for the Chaldanes. Cold Taskmaster, 1 brain, many bodies. They also gain accolades and flaws. There's some talents specific to the Morgor, like frightening foe, tough as bone, position of strength. For the Saboteurs, they have some talents as well. Underestimated warrior, maintaining morale. The Messinas, born climbers, ambush predators, landing on their feet. Yeah, cool. Then the Ghoulians, they have the ability to grand boast. That's interesting. They gain that accolade. Then there's lots of stuff for mixed heritage characters. So there's basic rules for mixed heritage characters in the core rulebook, but these add a bunch more talents selected from a character's 4 starting ranks. This will give the character a little additional flavor that matches their mixed heritage. So there's new talents for Earthborn and Red Martian mixed, Earthborn and Okar, Earthborn and Firstborn. Yeah, we'll go through all of these, but that's quite cool. Basically, all the different races on Barsoom can pretty freely interbreed with each other. So they give you some additional talents here to just add flavor to those mixed heritage characters. Then we're into the Champions of the Era once more. So these are some new characters. We've got Horton Gur, the Jadak of Turquoise. Another green Martian Jadak over there. Vaskor, Spy and Saboteur of Dusar. Astok, the Vile Prince of Dusar. Tario, the Jadak of Lothar. It seems he has the ability to create illusions. Grade 10 talent of Unmatched Illusionist. Ooh, that seems terrifying. Dejor Kantos, Heroic Son of the Great Captain. Valiadia, Kindly Prince of Duhor. Gek, the Renegade Kaldane. Lud, the Kaldane King. Zaxa, Tyrant Jadara of Fundal. Jalhad, the Prince of Amhor. Dar Taros, he's got a cool picture there. Jadak of Fundal. Gor Hajus, famed assassin of Tunal. Wow, a lot of new supporting characters here. Hovandu, Ape-Man Mad Science Experiment. Okay. Tul Akstar, the Cowardly Tyrant of Jahar. Interesting. Cowardly Tyrant is an interesting combo of characteristics. Tan Hadron of Hastor, the Fighting Man of Helium. Tavia, the Escaped Slave and Adventurer. Rapas the Ulcio, a Zodangan informant and assassin. Fal Sivas, Cruel Genius, an inventor of the mechanical brain. Ooh, so I guess there's perhaps AI elements here. It looks a bit freaky there. Rastavas, the mastermind of Mars. He has the talent of Emotionless and Master of Life and Death. Wow. Garnal is the inventor of the interplanetary ship. So I guess that's why we're bringing in all these characters from Jupiter and stuff. Then we have Urjan, head of the Assassins Guild. And that guy's about to unwittingly get stabbed. We have Umka, the Messina Hunter. Vordaj, Hormad with the brain of a man. Interesting. So maybe another mad science problem there. Anatok, the Jadak of Ghoulie. So that must be one of the Ghoulians, the kangaroo men. Bandolian, Emperor of the Morgors. Looking very creepy and corpse-like there. Multas Par, the traitor to Barsoom. Doesn't sound good. And finally, Folar, the Saboteur Rebel. And then we get into our updates of existing characters. So it's more significant in this era, because we're covering a lot of books in this Jadak of Jadak's era. So John Carter gained some new talents at grade 6 and grade 5. Deja Thoris gained some new talents. Tars Tarkus as well. Cathoris, the son of John Carter, I believe, gained some talents. Same again for Kantos Khan and Zodar. Then we have some new mysteries of Barsoom. So more objects to grant you invisibility. New weaponry, including disintegration rays. That's rather terrifying. For game purposes, only flesh disintegration rifles are listed here. They gain the quiet quality and inflict 2 dice of damage. They gain the gruesome damage quality and are considered dishonorable. Well, okay. Gruesome damage. So weapons with this quality result in horrific damage. For each effect rolled, the target suffers 1 damage to each of their stress trackers. When attacking with this weapon, you may spend 3 momentum to cause the weapon to inflict an affliction for each effect rolled instead. Wow, so you can really take out a character from the fight, basically. If you spend 3 momentum and you roll a bunch of effects, you can afflict them a bunch of times and basically make them next to useless. Energy Lances, another new weapon. They gain the fearsome and quiet qualities and inflict 4 dice of damage. They're never available as core equipment and have no associated XP costs, so they're quite difficult to get hold of. Then we have arcane items of power, including scintillating prisms, mass manipulation belts. So I guess this experimentation with Barsoom's mysterious ninth ray has produced a collection of devices commonly called mass manipulation belts, which allow the wearer to increase or decrease the size of their body. Oh, that's pretty cool. Then we have spacecraft. Very cool. Thinking machines, so mechanical brains and AI of some kind. Then we got some new talents and powers, mind reading, mind control. So again, the psychic powers becoming more significant in this era. Generating illusions, the mercurial mind, so that's immunity to mental attacking psychic powers, psychokinesis at higher grades, Assassin's Guild training. Then we've got new mysterious places like the Fields of Jatan, the Workshops of Tunol, Corfal's Cave, the Aviaries of Morbus, Ruins of Raxar, and Exum, which I guess is this odd-looking place here. Pretty cool. Then we've got narrator tips, what makes the era tick, common themes and tone, strange threats and stranger allies, and weird science, definitely a theme. Yeah, the new generation of heroes is arising as well. The struggle to maintain peace. Then there's some interesting storylines, I guess, with the Assassin's Guild, and the discovery of some lost cities and ancient ruins. Then we've got the mysteries of other worlds. Barsoom, the first planet, Kosum, or Venus, the second planet. And apparently Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote 4 novels and 1 novelette set on Venus, describing the adventures of Carson Napier, an Earthman, upon that watery, jungle-covered planet called Amtor by its inhabitants. If desired, the world of Amtor can be easily depicted using the John Carter rules. Well, that's interesting. So you could actually extend your campaign all the way to Venus if you want. Jasum, of course, is Earth. Sasum is the 5th planet, inhabited by the skeleton men of Jupiter. And then we have the 2 Martian moons called Thuria and Cluros. So Thuria has the Tarids, a pale skin of blue-haired people who worship the sun, and the Messina, who we saw as a player character option earlier. Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the nearby worlds beyond Barsoom. Skeleton Men of Jupiter is the final journey Carter described to Burroughs, and further pages in the saga are left blank. So it gives you some tips on how you might continue from there. And then some further adventure ideas. So, Storm of the Millennium out of Earth. Interesting. So we got lots of adventure seeds here with possible characters that could be involved, and some further motivations. Then we have random adventure generation. Very useful for one-offs if you're a GM and your player characters want to do something and you're not really prepared, or you're too busy at work to do something. You can roll on these tables, give you antagonists, dramatic escalations, late setbacks, resolutions, even cliffhangers to end on. And then we have the rules for mad science. So there's new metals and chemicals to deal with, new methods of communication and detection, flyers and spaceships, the Morgor ships, the use of the mechanical minds, new tools of war and horrors of science, the nightmare city of Corvus. That doesn't sound very good. Then we have rules for limb and organ transplants, brain surgery, as you can see there. Yeah, blood transfusions, and then rules for developing inventions. So what you need, the different grades of inventions you can have, the invention type, and the base difficulty grade. So yeah, you can do your own weird science as well if you want. And here's some factors that can cause increases in grade and XP cost. Increasing the number of scenes an invention lasts for. So you can gain additional durability for your inventions. Optional rules for flaws for your inventions. And then some finishing touches. Of course, you can also purchase inventions from somebody else. You can improvise things in the moment. Gives the examples of smoke bombs, makeshift lockpicks. You can modify things, making a radium shotgun, invisible daggers, 8th ray armor for a complex item, and then some new talents for scientists as well. So yeah, they're really digging deep on the weird science elements of the era in this book, which is pretty cool. I like that each era supplement, has some significant rules addition. You know, we have airships and air combat in Dotar Sojat. We've got supporting characters in the Prince of Helium, and then we've got mad science and weird science in the Jadok and Jadox era. So lots of new options both for players and GMs, which is always nice to see. So there you go. That is our coverage of the era supplements for John Carter of Mars. So thanks for joining me for part 2. Next up in part 3, we'll take a quick look at the accessories, and that will finally bring you to the end of everything that's available for John Carter, save the one set of planetary or of combat tiles, rather, that I couldn't find on the Modiphius store during the sale. So until then, I hope you're all staying safe and well, and I look forward to seeing you in part 3. Bye-bye.